If it's Wednesday, it's 20 days to the election. Vice President Harris hits battleground Pennsylvania, courting moderate Republicans as she doubles down on her attacks on former President Trump, calling him unhinged and unstable. And Trump hits back, leaning into inflammatory rhetoric, casting his political rivals as sick, evil, and the enemy from within, while sidestepping questions about whether he would respect and encourage a peaceful transfer of power. Plus, another ultimatum for Israel, as the Biden administration warns that it might restrict military assistance if Israel does not improve humanitarian conditions in Gaza within the next 30 days. Welcome to Meet the Press Now. I'm Garrett Hake in Washington, as both presidential candidates pursue very different strategies to reach voters with just 20 days until Election Day. At this hour, Vice President Harris is hitting the campaign trail in the critical battleground of Pennsylvania for the second time this week. You're looking at live pictures of Harris speaking in the suburbs of Philadelphia at an event focused on outreach to disaffected Republicans and calls for bipartisan unity. She will continue that outreach later tonight in an interview on Fox News as her campaign continues to focus on a big tent strategy to eke out votes in an election that remains deadlocked at the polls. At the same time, Harris is trying to shore up support from the Democratic base, particularly among black men. In an interview with radio host Charlemagne the God in Detroit yesterday, Harris acknowledging those votes can't be taken for granted.
I need to earn every vote, which is why I'm here having this candid conversation with you and your listeners. Mm-hmm. I have to earn people's support, and I am working to do that.
Before we go to another talkback call, I want to say there was a time I had a politician tell me once that if you're running for a national election, it's bad electoral strategy to say you are going to do things specifically for black people, which is why a lot of politicians don't speak directly to their plans for black people. Is that a thing?
I don't know that that's true. I think that what is true is that I am running to be president for everybody, but I am clear-eyed about the history and the disparities that exist for specific communities, and I'm not going to shy away from that.
The media blitz comes as former President Trump doubles down on recent comments, calling Democrats who oppose him, quote, the enemy from within. A threat so severe, according to Mr. Trump, that he would consider calling in the U.S. military. Here he is defending some of those comments during a Fox News town hall that aired earlier today.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. They're Marxists and communists and fascists, and they're sick. They're dangerous for our country. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick, and they're so evil.
It comes as Mr. Trump is also repeating false claims about 2020 election fraud while sidestepping questions about committing to a peaceful transfer of power. Here he is during a testing interview with Bloomberg at the Economic Club of Chicago yesterday.
Will you commit now to respecting and encouraging a peaceful transfer of power?
Well, you had a peaceful transfer of power.
You had a peaceful transfer of power. You had a peaceful... Come on, President Trump. You had a peaceful transfer of power compared with Venezuela, but it was by far the worst transfer of power for a long time.
We had a term, peacefully and patriotically. These were people. If you think an election is crooked, and I do, 100%, and it was love and peace, and some people went to the Capitol, and a lot of strange things happened there. But you had a peaceful, very peaceful. I left the morning that I was supposed to leave. I went to Florida, and you had a very peaceful transfer.
And joining me now is our NBC News team. Ali Rafa is at the White House covering the Harris campaign. Dasha Burns is in Atlanta, Georgia, covering the Trump campaign. And Vaughn Hilliard is in Kingman, Arizona, where the Trump campaign is hoping to convince Republicans to vote early. Ali, I'll start with you. The vice president is speaking right now. What have we heard from her so far today?
Yeah, Garrett, the vice president taking the stage just a few minutes ago, and she is appearing with, she says, over 100 Republican leaders in Pennsylvania, who she says come from a range of former Republican administrations, including the administration of former President Trump. And she's making the case that all of these leaders respect the oath of office, respect the rule of law in this country. She's bringing up former President Trump's actions, specifically on January 6th, as the attack on the Capitol was underway. She's talking about how Republicans and her campaign have more similarities than differences, saying that Republicans, specifically those disaffected Republicans, those never Trumper Republicans who may feel like their party has moved on without them, have more in common with her than they may think. And this is all part of her effort to reach out to those Republicans, to really throw everything the Harris campaign has at the wall, trying to make sure that all voters, including these Republicans, come out on Election Day, Garrett.
And does the campaign think it can make real inroads with Republicans who aren't voting for Trump? Like if you're going to vote for a Republican down ballot, not just if you used to be a Republican and you don't like Trump anymore?
They do, and this was an investment that we saw made even back when this was the still Biden campaign. Remember, they hired that Republican outreach director to lead this effort, and ever since then, we have seen the Harris campaign, ever since she took the torch from President Biden, lean into this. You saw her appear with former Republican Congresswoman Liz Cheney a couple of weeks ago, talking about what they have in common and what more they can build on as far as their similarities, again, saying that they should put country before party. And you see the vice president, as well as her running mate, Governor Tim Walz, lean more into, outside of their comfort zone, sitting down with more conservative media outlets. Walz sitting down for 2 weekends in a row with Fox News, and Fox says that that was at the insistence or the outreach of the actually the Harris campaign. And now tonight we're going to see the vice president herself sit down for the first time with this interview with Fox News and anchor Brett Baer. So this is something that they hope is going to pay off with just a couple of weeks left, but it is a months-long effort that they see as definitely worth the energy and investments into this effort, Garrett.
Well, and if that's one end of the big tent, the other part is shoring up the base. We mentioned the Harris campaign working to mobilize the black vote, specifically among black men. Obviously, this is happening in real time. That Charlamagne the God interview was just yesterday, but is there any sense that the overtures the campaign is making are paying a return?
Well, I think it's still too early to tell, since we're just over the last week seeing really the campaign really lean into this effort. But we've seen in poll after poll the vice president struggle to meet President Biden's numbers where they were in 2020 with specifically this group. And that's why you see her doing this outreach when on Monday, when she was in Pennsylvania meeting with black business owners. And then, as you mentioned, yesterday in Detroit, sitting down with Charlamagne the God, talking on that radio show that is very popular with black listeners. And she's leaning on the help of these super surrogates, in this case, former President Obama, who the campaign sees as the perfect person to help deliver this message. And we're told from sources familiar that this is going to be a very personal effort for him up until Election Day. So the Harris campaign hoping that all of that put together will pay off on Election Day, Garrett.
All right, Ali Rafa for us at the White House. Ali, thank you. And Dasha, it was only a few weeks ago where Donald Trump was criticizing Kamala Harris for her perceived lack of interviews. Now we've not seen much of him outside of the more friendly conservative platforms. What is the Trump media strategy with the 3 weeks to go now? Is it just to keep him off of unfriendly airwaves?
Well, look, Garrett, right now, the campaign feels good. They feel like the indicators are pointing in the right direction. They feel like they just need to keep hammering the message, keep hammering the opponent. They've been watching the Harris media blitz and feel like she's created some openings for them to make those clips and to be critical of her. They've been playing that clip from The View where she says there's not a thing she would do differently than President Biden. They have been playing that at every rally that I've been to recently. Although I'll say today and yesterday, with massive early voting numbers in Georgia might be a good sign and maybe a worrying sign for former President Trump, a good sign for Vice President Harris. But look, I will say he did do that Bloomberg News event, and he is doing a Univision town hall today. So they're letting him out there a little bit. The thing that they want to do right now is no harm, is no unforced errors, and try to stay to the message. And that's really what they're hoping to do, that discipline, which can be challenging with the former president in the last 3 weeks, Garrett.
Yeah, I mean, look, to that end, you talk about moments creating clips. There's this enemy from within moment that the former president keeps going back to defend. Are you picking up any concern among the campaign or among other Republicans that this is kind of him stepping on a rake or giving the vice president the kind of contrast she would like to make?
Yeah, the campaign doesn't want any headlines that aren't about the economy or immigration. You saw him even at the town hall with women on Fox News yesterday. So many of those answers, he was trying to bring it back to immigration. But then there are moments where he can't help himself, and he does say things like enemy from within. He doubled down on that in another recent interview, saying that people like Nancy Pelosi are evil and dangerous. Yeah, the allies don't love that. At the same time, some people in his campaign say, look, this is the time to really put pressure on the opponent, to paint that bleak picture of what the country might look like if Vice President Harris does win. And so there's that split between his advisors, those who are like, yeah, let's be aggressive and Trump's going to be Trump and do it in his own way, and others that would wish he would just stick to the economy and immigration, Garrett.
Clearly not just sticking to anything here these last couple of days. Dasha Burns in Atlanta. Dasha, thank you. And Vaughn, you're in Arizona, where Trump is doing something that may seem a little bit unusual. He's talking about turning out his base, voting early, not on Election Day. What are you hearing?
Right. Number one, Garrett, I think to the point that you and Dasha were just making here is that sort of rhetoric appeals to a great many MAGA faithful to Donald Trump, and that is what galvanizes them to come out to the polls. And as you mentioned, this go around, Donald Trump is actually telling people to vote early. I want to let you hear from a couple folks, because we're here in Mojave County, which is, you could call MAGA country of Arizona. This is a place that 75% went for Donald Trump in 2020. And there is a belief that they can juice turnout even more in this Trump area to compensate for what may be a deficit in the likes of Maricopa County, which is the greater suburban area around Phoenix. I want to let you listen to a few of the folks who we talked to going to their early voting location about voting for the former president. Compare 2020 for Donald Trump here in Mojave County to 2024 from your eyes.
Overwhelming voter turnout. It's been great.
Why did you vote early this year?
Honestly, because Donald Trump told me to.
What a good answer.
He keeps saying it, and I've been thinking about it, and so here I am.
He's good, he really is. He's in it for the power, I know that.
Oh, okay, we got to leave too.
And most of them are, so.
But you want him to have that power?
Him? Yeah, yep, I do.
Robert, that last gentleman you heard from, he did not vote in 2020. He is one of those people who was a registered Republican, didn't vote in 2020, who they believe are going to make the difference this go around. The first woman you heard from, Jody, is one of what they say is a 600 volunteer grassroots network out here of folks who are identifying registered Republicans that didn't vote in 2020. And they are of the belief, and the way that they're persuading themselves and energizing themselves to get out there every day, Garrett, is to say that if they get 10% more registered Republicans to come out to the polls than did in 2020, they believe that would make up the difference to give Donald Trump the victory here in Arizona.
Right. They've got to find these people who are Trump supporters but not Trump voters and make them change hats. It's going to be an interesting search all across the country. And Vaughn Hilliard, you're on top of it for us today. Thank you. And joining me now to break down some more of this is our NBC News chief political analyst, Chuck Todd. So, Chuck, as Harris is trying to appeal to everyone on the trail, our latest poll shows she may be getting bogged down by Joe Biden's record. Your column this week, you called his unpopularity the mood music of this election. How so?
Well, I mean, you can just look at our own polling, right? We also tested the term Bidenomics. It was super underwater. Democrats barely have a positive view of Bidenomics. Independents 2-1 against it. Overall, nearly 2-1 against it. When you look at his job approval rating, he's at his lowest disapproval that he's been at all year, 54%. Well, that's still a majority of it's a larger majority. more people disapprove of Joe Biden's presidency than will collectively vote for the winner of this presidential election, Garrett, which means there are going to be people that Harris has to win over who don't like Joe Biden's presidency. Look, I think it all sort of conforms to what you're seeing, and I think in very much, Garrett, that what I was writing about, how the Harris campaign is campaigning, and frankly, what Trump is trying to do, sort of tells you where this electorate is. The electorate has shifted to the right in this country.
Yeah.
Okay? For the last 4 years, the Republican Party has re-registered, has done voter registration, has run circles around the Democratic Party on voter registration. They have upped the numbers. This is a different electorate. While the map may look the same, the country has shifted a point or two to the right. Well, what does that mean? It means Harris has to win a majority of independents and some of these Trump skeptical Republicans. So in theory, she's talking to the right group of voters. Now, the question is she saying what's necessary to then get them to do something they normally don't do, which is not vote for a Republican, right?
Right.
And I think that's the question. Has she broken from Biden enough? They know, you can see they know who their voter is that they have to get. But are they messaging to that voter correctly? And my argument is they're frankly a bit too bogged down by Biden and Biden's record, and they haven't found a better way to separate yet. Look, this is hard for many sitting vice presidents, but Al Gore broke harder than she did from Clinton. Hubert Humphrey broke harder from LBJ than she has. Both still ended up losing, but they lost by a nose hair. Okay, and I don't think she's broken enough yet from Biden.
Well, and Biden himself seemed to give her a little bit of permission almost yesterday. Let's listen to this.
Every president has to cut their own path. That's what I did. I was loyal to Barack Obama, but I cut my own path as president. That's what Kamala's going to do. She's been loyal so far, but she's going to cut her own path. Kamala will take the country in her own direction. And that's one of the most important differences in this election.
So what does cutting her own path look like, Chuck? Or what does it need to look like? I mean, I was struck by the fact that her opportunity agenda for black men included legalizing marijuana, which I didn't feel like got a lot of attention, but it's definitely a policy break from Biden.
Yes, that's a policy break, but that's a policy break that sort of, it's not a, that isn't a big deal to the other voters she needs. And I think the voter she needs more is that center-right voter that doesn't like Trump, that would prefer, let's just say, something that's slightly more to the right than what the Democrats are offering.
But is Kamala
Harris,
is Kamala Harris going to be able to come out and credibly say, I'm with you now and I'm to the right of Joe Biden?
It depends on how she says it. So, for instance, on the border, I think she missed an opportunity 2 weeks ago. On one hand, she tried to virtue signal that she was going to be as tough on the border, that she wasn't going to let this policy go, and she tried to be a little tougher. She worded it wrong. She needs to acknowledge that the Biden administration didn't get it right. So there's a way here to play a little Clinton triangulation. It's a simple thing. Hey, we didn't get this policy right. Now we're finally getting it right, and Garrett, I'm not going to let it go backwards. So then you take you sort of do a little mea culpa, but you sort of say, hey, he blew it. I'm not going to blow it.
To me,
when the buck stops with me. And then you let reporters know, wow, that's a big break. She has not done something enough where the public says, wow, now that's a break from Biden. By the way, you know who she could learn from? Joe Biden. That guy and his staff throws Barack Obama under the bus constantly, thinking, so I don't think they ought to worry about what Biden and his staff thinks if she does it.
I sort of wonder if it's a trap where the Trump campaign then immediately comes out and says, oh, well, if you were so influential,
well... Garrett, so what? That actually only helps them with that voter they're looking... They don't...
The enemy of their enemy.
That voter doesn't trust or like Donald Trump. So there's nothing, so that's not... I mean, in some ways, you want to do it enough where Trump does notice and then accidentally reinforces your message to that group of voters.
Chuck, in the 30 seconds or so we have left, DJ Donald from Monday night, is this the kind of thing that's going to be still a factor in voters' minds in 20 days or when they're voting right now?
The other part of when I say that people don't like Biden in this election, the other thing they didn't like about him was that he was aging and not all there. Anytime I think Donald Trump introduces the idea that, he's not as with it as he was the last time, or he's kind of getting odd, or he's kind of... I don't think that helps him. That stuff was hidden when Biden was his opponent. So, look, we have plenty of polling to prove that they didn't like the wanting to elect Biden as the oldest president we've ever elected. Well, now it's Donald Trump that's in position to be the oldest president we've ever elected. And those moments, I think, allow Harris to bring up age, and that's his biggest negative.
Yeah, we'll see if they continue to add up over the next 20 days. Chuck Todd, thank you for that analysis.
All right, buddy.
And coming up, we'll dive deeper into the latest from the campaign trail as both campaigns take shots at each other on the issue of fitness for office. Plus, it could be the Democrats' best shot at holding the Senate, pulling off an upset in Texas. No, yes, that's right, Texas, as Ted Cruz and Democratic challenger Colin Allred face off in their first and potentially only debate. My panel joins me to break it all down next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. And staying on the campaign trail, last night was debate night in my home state of Texas. Republican Senator Ted Cruz and Democratic Congressman Colin Allred met on stage in Dallas for the first and likely the only time this cycle, as Democrats are once again hoping to pull off an upset in the Lone Star State, as their path to holding the Senate majority seems to be narrowing everywhere else. Allred hit Cruz hard on everything from abortion to leaving Texas for Cancun during the middle of a winter storm to his persona in the Senate.
He's never there for us when we need him. When the lights went out in the energy capital of the world, he went to Cancun. On January 6th, when a mob was storming the Capitol, he was hiding in a supply closet. And when the toughest border security bill in a generation came up in the United States Senate, he took it down. He's been one of the most divisive senators in the entire country. If you don't like how things are going in Washington right now, well, you know what? He is singularly responsible for it. He has introduced this new kind of angertainment where you just get people upset and then you podcast about it and you write a book about it and you make some money on it. But you're not actually there when people need you, like when the lights went out. When 30 million Texans were relying on a senator to spring into action, he went to Cancun. That's who he is.
At the same time, Cruz did his best to tie Allred to Kamala Harris and to other Democrats, which could go a long way in a state that hasn't voted for a Democratic president since the 1970s.
Understand at home, Colin Allred is Kamala Harris. Their records are the same. I've served with both of them. They voted in favor of open borders over and over and over again, and now they are desperately trying to hide that from the voters. Now, I've spent 12 years fighting every single day to defend jobs and freedom and security. Congressman Allred wants to destroy what we've got in Texas because he shares Nancy Pelosi and Kamala Harris's value. I will fight to keep Texas, Texas.
And joining me now on set is Shelby Talcott, reporter for Semaphore, Naveen Nayak, president and executive director of the Center for American Progress Action Fund, and Republican strategist and former Trump White House official Matt Mowers. Shelby, I'll start with you. Texas has been, loosely pulling the football for Democrats from cycle after cycle after cycle. Is there anything that should make us think this time will be anything different?
I mean, the polls are closer in this race, but not in the presidential race. But what I thought was interesting in that debate was how representative it was of the presidential debate. We saw Ted Cruz sort of struggle on his abortion answers. We saw Allred struggle on immigration. And then we also saw a really long exchange about transgender participation in sports, which the Trump campaign has really honed in on in recent weeks and begun putting out campaign ads and highlighting that more and more. So it was really representative of what's going on in the presidential election as well.
And I feel like that's a sleeper issue, the transgender sport things. It gets a huge reaction at Trump events when you're there. It's clearly motivating. Naveen, I feel like Beto O'Rourke kind of snuck up on Ted Cruz 6 years ago, I guess now. It's hard to imagine Colin Allred sneaking up on him. How hopeful should Democrats be about that race, or do you think it's fool's gold potential?
I mean, listen, it's within the margin of error. And, I think that is something that Texans would not have thought, Republicans would not have thought at the start of this cycle. They thought Florida and Texas were safe seats. So credit to Colin Allred. And, he's really put that race in play. And I do think he really hit on the points that are going to put him over the top, which is Not going after Republicans, but going after Ted Cruz.
That's right.
Right? And it is Ted Cruz on abortion who, was way out of step with where most Texans are on this issue. No exceptions for rape and incest. And he was uncomfortable with that answer. It was Ted Cruz on January 6th who, was the one who objected, who was actually, along with Josh Hawley, the one who told people to come and protest. And so I think you could see him trying to appeal to the moderate Republican. He's going to have to win over Republicans to win the state. I thought he had a fantastic debate.
He's going to need a lot of suburban Republicans who are going to vote for Republicans up and down the ballot, but who don't like Ted Cruz. Matt, and the rest of the Senate map is looking increasingly favorable to Republicans. I mean, how do you view the likelihood that we are dealing with a Republican Senate majority here next year? I mean, even if they don't pick off any of these blue wall states, they seem to be pretty close.
Yeah, I mean, you got to remember, most of the Senate battleground and the states that matter is being fought in MAGA territory, right? These are states that Donald Trump is going to win by probably 10 or plus points, certainly in the case of West Virginia and Montana, 2 seats that are essentially off the board for Democrats, I'd argue, at this point. I mean, Donald Trump's going to win Montana by close to 20 points, West Virginia by, 100 points. And then you've got to come down to Ohio, where Donald Trump is likely to win by at least 8 points. And most folks think that's kind of the breaking point for the undercard, right? For Bernie Moreno to beat Sherrod Brown in an increasingly red state. Looking at Texas and Florida, Republicans actually, including Republican senators I've talked to, the NRSC, have long recognized that both Florida and Texas were going to be somewhat close, but there's an insurmountable issue for Democrats to win in each of those states. And everything Naveen said is fine if you want to get to 47, 48% in a state like Texas. To get that final 5% or so is going to be really challenging. And ever-increasing national environment in these state races, like Shelby's talking about, I mean, we're a parliamentary system, essentially. You're voting for the top of the ticket and straight on down. Really makes it difficult for Democrats to succeed in Texas when Trump wins by probably at least 5 points.
And as Texas Democrats will tell you, especially when you don't start until 3 weeks before Election Day, you've got to start building that infrastructure much earlier. On the topic of Democrats and Republicans and the potential for crossover votes, I want to play a little bit of what Kamala Harris just had to say at her event in suburban Philadelphia on this very issue. Let's listen.
He has stated that one of the biggest threats America faces is, quote, the enemy from within. He considers any American who doesn't support him or bend to his will to be an enemy to our country. Anyone who tramples on our democratic values, as Donald Trump has, anyone who has called for the, quote, termination of the Constitution of the United States, as Donald Trump has, must never again stand behind the seal of the President of the United States.
Naveen, what do you make of that? Is that an effective play for Republicans? Is that a play for Democrats who will get more motivated by being reminded of all these things they don't like about Trump?
I think it's the core argument, and I hope we keep hearing something like this for the last 3 weeks. Listen, there's one thing. Since 2016, all Donald Trump has done is lost. He lost in 18, he lost in 20. MAGA and Trump got crushed in 22 when they should have won. And the reason is that Americans are deeply uncomfortable with this extremism, with this thirst for power, with this comfort around violence. Remember, in 22, one of the defining events was Paul Pelosi getting attacked and Donald Trump laughing about it and mocking it. And that is who Republicans are, who Donald Trump is today. And I think Kamala Harris has to spend the last 3 weeks reminding not only people who are not that engaged in politics, yes, there's something at stake here, you have to turn out, and people who are Republicans, like reminding that they're cross-pressured, that they might still be Republicans on November 6th, but they're not for MAGA and Trump on November 5th.
Shelby, you and I spent a lot of time covering Donald Trump, and I'm sure you probably got a lot of the same feedback I did a year ago, which was from Democrats saying, why do you platform him? Why do you put him on TV or in your stories? Now it's the opposite. Democrats are saying, you got to go out and watch Trump rallies, right? You got to go watch the whole thing. What do you make of that strategy of exposing voters to more Trump? And have you ever seen anything like that in a race you've covered before?
No, this is certainly unique, especially when it comes to Donald Trump. And I think it's interesting because when Kamala Harris first got into the race, race, she really abandoned that Joe Biden argument of Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. This is her version of that argument.
Yeah.
But she's using Donald Trump's own words to sort of bring it back around and to say it in a different way that her campaign feels will be more effective to those voters. Now, I'm sure you've talked to undecided voters just as much as I have. I think the challenge for her is convincing some of these voters to take his words seriously, because when I talk to a lot of undecided voters, they say, well, we had Donald Trump for 4 years and he didn't do all of these things, so why should we take him literally this time around? And that's going to be the big challenge.
Matt, if you were advising the Trump campaign here, would you have him out doing more friendly media? Would you have him addressing these things more fulsomely? I mean, the strategy right now seems to be basically hide him from most difficult questions.
Well, and part of that's a strategy based upon where you believe the race is today or not. If you ask the Trump campaign, and they'll tell you privately as much as they will publicly, they believe they're winning right now, right? They believe they're up by at least a point and a solid point that's going to hold for the next 3 weeks in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan. They put out every poll, and Nevada even, according to the polling they put out from Tony Fabrizio this past week in the last few days. And so what do you do when you're up? You hold the ball. Right. It's prevent defense. You're trying to just talk to your audience. Not to mention the fact that there's really no undecided voters. Right? And I think
very few.
There's if you look at polling, there's maybe 2%. And I would venture to guess, as someone who's run campaigns before, that half those people are lying and the other half are just not going to show up. Well, and by lying, I mean they've made up their mind. They just don't want to tell you.
I've said this our viewers have heard me say this before in other contexts. I don't think there are any undecided voters about Donald Trump. I think everybody in this country knows how they feel about Donald Trump, but they're not entirely sure necessarily how they feel about Kamala Harris. And to that end, her going on Fox News today, Naveen, do you think there are minds that can be made up by doing that? And is there a side benefit of knowing that the #1 Fox News viewer in the country will probably be watching?
Well, listen, I think the thing, when you look at these surveys, there is 3 to 4% who haven't made up their mind at some level, right? They might, have a bias one way or the other, but they've made up their mind on Trump. And so I do think there is work for her to do on two fronts. One is continuing to make them feel comfortable. I think one of the incredible things of this campaign is that she went from being 15 solid points underwater in her favorability to being consistently net favorable or even, which I think is something, if I'm the Trump campaign,
down a little bit now, but it was a huge jump.
She's basically even, and I think that is a huge failure for the Trump campaign, because their whole theory of the case in August is we're going to make her unpopular. And the second, Shelby's point here is really important. If the threat is just about what Trump did in the first term, I think it fails. I think we hear voters saying we survived this. Right. That's why Project 2025 has been so important, and I think it's going to be a big part of the last 3 weeks, because that is the playbook of what he would do moving forward, and it's much scarier for voters when they hear about it.
An argument I've been skeptical of, but has shown up in the polling as something that does seem to be working. I would love to spend more time on this, but we have to leave it there. We've got a lot more news we've got to do. Shelby, Naveen, and Matt Mowers, thank you all for coming in. And after the break, the battle to secure the vote amid an intensifying misinformation campaign and threats against election workers. Colorado's top elections official, Secretary of State Jena Griswold, joins us next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Voting has already begun in Colorado, where registered voters can now start casting their ballots by mail. It comes as secretaries of state across the country contend with growing threats of violence against election workers and an increase in misinformation designed to deceive voters or undermine the confidence in the results. Top officials in Colorado encouraged voters this week to be wary of intimidation and election disinformation. The RNC, meanwhile, says it has recruited more than 200,000 volunteers to watch polls in Democratic cities next month. NBC News has exclusive reporting on how Trump allies stoked election chaos in Detroit in 2020 and what they're planning for this November. I'm joined now by Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold. She's also the chair of the Democratic Association of Secretaries of State. Madam Secretary, thank you for joining us. Georgia, which just started its early voting yesterday, saw record turnout for the first 2 days of its in-person early voting. What type of turnout are you expecting? What are you seeing so far in Colorado?
Well, first off, thank you for having me. And that's great that Georgia's seeing such high turnout. We hope to have record turnout also. Now, in Colorado, ballots started to go out Friday. They have to be mailed by this Friday, so there's a week to get those mail ballots out. And we expect there to be a great election this year, just like always.
For folks who don't know, Colorado is the 100% vote by mail and runs things a little bit differently than a lot of other states. When we're dealing with the misinformation part of this, how do you talk to people who are concerned about things like the drop boxes and whether or not they're monitored all the time? How can you assure voters that all of their votes will be counted and that there won't be widespread fraud beyond the fact that there hasn't been in the past?
Well, first off, every active voter in Colorado is mailed a mail ballot, but we also have weeks of early voting and election day voting. This election will have over 400 drop boxes and over 300 in-person voting centers open all across the state. Our election model prioritizes access and security, and it's very important to push back on basically misinformation that says you have to give up access for security. That's just not true. And when it comes to all the disinformation, I've been really proud to lead the way nationally on countering disinformation. I launched the first office on election disinformation and countering it back in 2019. Since then, we have been pushing out proactive initiatives to Colorado voters, urging them to go to a trusted source and to be aware of disinformation. And then just this year, we led one of the nation's first laws, along with several other states, on deep fakes, which is a new AI potential of disinformation that changes how someone speaks or what they're doing, manipulates it, and it might be really hard for voters or any Americans to understand what's real or not if we don't get ahead of deep fakes.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that particular problem. Talk to me about what your additional steps your office has taken to try to combat this misinformation. And are you more concerned about misinformation leading up to people casting their votes or misinformation about what the voting says, what the results are?
We're concerned about all types of election disinformation, specifically with deepfakes, which are AI-altered images or audio of candidates or officials. We, on top of just passing a law to regulate that, have gone through disaster scenario trainings with our county election officials and have response plans in place if there is deep-faked information about the electoral process. Disinformation is just so damaging to our electoral process. And make no mistake, one of Donald Trump and the MAGA right's aims is to push out election disinformation, to confuse folks. It has been used as a basis to suppress the vote. It has been used to incite threats to election workers and to our election systems. And it's so important that we push back on the lies, but also that we have clear consequences to anybody who would try to undermine the electoral process for their own political gain or because of disinformation.
Well, and, you know, when you're out there online, it's like one man's disinformation is another's free speech. It's a huge sort of battle in that ecosystem on the far right, especially. I want to ask you about the poll watchers part of this. I mentioned 200,000 volunteers or so. The RNC is basically assembling an army of poll watchers all around the country, mostly in Democrat-heavy cities, which you have, you know, at least one in Colorado. How do you balance these poll watchers' rights to monitor what is happening there without voters feeling intimidated at the polls?
Well, poll watchers who are following the law and are credentialed are a positive thing. We have poll watchers provide oversight of the electoral process and report back to candidates or campaigns to provide that layer of transparency. That's not anything new. But what is not acceptable is any type of intimidation. And we will be taking that very seriously in the state of Colorado. Intimidation is illegal. We do have cameras up in front of all the drop boxes across the state. We will be referring any type of intimidation to law enforcement. And then there's a series of new laws in place that I've ran over the last several years, including making it illegal to have a gun close to a drop box, a polling center, or where ballots are processed. No voter should be afraid or feel afraid to cast a ballot, and no election worker should feel afraid for doing their job either.
Back in March, you said that you were disappointed by the Supreme Court's ruling that Donald Trump must be allowed to remain on the Republican primary ballot there. State Republicans then tried and failed to impeach you in the weeks after that ruling. Now that we're 3 weeks from Election Day, what's your response to Trump supporters who feel like you can't preside over an election in which he's on the ballot and do your job fairly?
Well, first off, that's absolutely ridiculous. I presided over various elections with Republicans and Democrats, including Donald Trump, and presided over it correctly. And I think the basis of your question actually rests in disinformation. Republicans allege I'll tell you, Republicans in our state house alleged that I acted to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, when in fact Republican and unaffiliated voters cast a lawsuit against me as defendant to keep Donald Trump off the ballot, arguing that the Constitution would bar him because of his role in the insurrection. Now, by the time we went to the United States Supreme Court, I did side with the Colorado Supreme Court that did find that Donald Trump did engage in insurrection. Now, the United States Supreme Court never overruled that. They just said Congress has to act before a state. And I'll want to share the effects of disinformation that really started to spout out around this case in September. They have led to over 1,000 death threats or violent threats against me and my family. So that's just one snapshot of how easy it is for disinformation to spread, and unfortunately, bad political actors to lean into it. House Republicans in Colorado did try to impeach me on basically lies, that I brought this lawsuit, that they even alleged that Donald Trump was not on the presidential primary ballot, which he indeed was. And I'm still standing. The impeachment didn't go anywhere. I'm not going to be stopped because of threats, intimidation, or lies. And I encourage election workers all across the country to stand firm. We're here to make sure every Republican, Democrat, and unaffiliated voter can vote.
All right, Colorado Secretary of State Jena Griswold, thank you for your time. I hope you have a very boring election day.
Thank you.
And still to come, the little blue dot that could mean big things in this tight presidential race. We'll take you to Omaha, Nebraska, the blue city in a red state whose quirky electoral vote split is now in the spotlight. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. Vice presidential nominee Tim Walz will travel to Omaha Saturday to campaign in Nebraska's 2nd congressional district. It's a singular blue dot in a deep red state. One presidential electoral vote is at play there, and in the race to 270 electoral votes, every vote matters. Brian Mastery of WOWT NBC Omaha takes us to the Nebraska district that could, if it's close, swing the election.
The blue dot marks the spot in the Nebraska district that could break an electoral college tie this November. And now that the threat of changing Nebraska to a winner-take-all state is over, the spray-painted blue dot has been surfacing more and more in Omaha front yards.
Some people don't know what it is, but then they immediately realize, if they're aware of politics and the electoral college and how things work in this country, oh, I get it.
It represents Democrats' hopes to win Congressional District 2, and with it, one key electoral vote in an otherwise red state in the middle of the country. That's because while most states have a winner-take-all system, Nebraska, like Maine, accounts for wins inside congressional districts.
The blue dots are just making conversations and starting conversations about voting this year and how important that is.
Congressional District 2 is the purple outlier in the state's largest and most diverse city.
Yes, completely Bacon-Harris.
Mary Barrett is a lifelong Nebraska Democrat, but she supports the Republican congressional candidate Don Bacon. And history shows there are plenty more voters like Mary. In 2020, Republican Don Bacon won his district by 5 points, while Biden beat Trump by 7.
I'm a Democrat. I'm a Harris-Bacon voter.
Ann Ashford's late husband represented this district in Nebraska in the U.S. House of Representatives before Republican Don Bacon beat him in 2016.
That constituents are always more important than political parties. It's vital to keep a level head and be the adult in the room.
Since 1992, when Nebraska changed its law to split its electoral votes, the Nebraska blue dot has only actually been blue twice, for Obama in 2008 and Biden in 2020. And both times the Republican congressional candidate won. With the rise of the blue dot in Omaha, Trump supporters are getting creative with their signs too. This homeowner has a red dot with Trump's signature hair on it, only it's been turned into Pac-Man. His appetite is to take down those blue dots.
Here's the key. With Republican and Democratic voter registrations fairly even here, there are 100,000 independents. Those voters will decide whether 5 electoral votes go to Donald Trump or 4 go to Donald Trump and 1 to Kamala Harris. Reporting from Omaha, NBC station WWT, I'm Brian Mastry.
Nice spot there from Brian Mastry. Thank you. And NBC's Steve Kornacki is here now to break down exactly what's at stake in Nebraska's 2nd Congressional District with just 19 days until the election.
All right, well, let's take a look. You can see this is our road to 270 map here in gray, all the core battleground states. Now, you notice here's Nebraska, and it's got those stripes, right? The stripes, that means it's that state that gives them out. As you just saw, the electoral votes by congressional district. State itself, solidly red, but the blue stripe, that district, that 2nd district, is expected to go Democratic and for Kamala Harris. And note, by the way, Maine, the other state that does it this way, expected to be blue in the presidential race as a state, but there's one district there that Donald Trump has won handily 2 times now, again, expected to go for Trump. But all of the money, all the resources, all the attention you just saw going into that 2nd district, why is it so important? It's especially important for Democrats because of this. There's an electoral map scenario for Kamala Harris that absolutely hinges on locking it down, and it would look like this. Split the battleground into 2, sort of north and south. The polling for Harris has been a little bit better in the northern tier of the battleground than in the southern tier. So this is all just for the sake of showing you this, but this is, you know, how the parties are thinking about this as well. If Harris were to get Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, you could see we light them up blue and she gets to 270, the exact magic number. And then the polling's been a little bit better for Trump generally in the southern tier of battleground states. So if Trump were to get North Carolina, hey, he won it in 16 and in 20. If he were to get Georgia, if he were to get Arizona, and if he were to get Nevada, now you see 270, 268. Doesn't get tighter than that, or does it? Because that is where the one electoral vote in Nebraska comes into play. Again, right now it's assumed to be Democratic, and in this scenario, it would be absolutely essential for Democrats to hang on to it, because obviously, if you call it up right there, see if we can call it up on the screen, and it is not popping up, but I'll show you because I think you could do the math at home anyway. 1 less for Harris would be 269. 1 more for Trump would be 269. There's your 269 tie. And the important thing is, if this ever is a tie, goes to the House, every congressman doesn't get a vote, but every state gets a vote. And no matter which party controls the House, the overwhelming expectation is Republicans will have more state delegations. So a tie in baseball goes to the runner. A tie in the Electoral College almost certainly goes for Trump. That's why Democrats are so heavily invested in that district. Now, the good news for Democrats is the polling says they're ahead in the 2nd District in Nebraska. New York Times Siena poll recently, 9-point advantage. Look, it's a suburban metropolitan district. Those are the kinds of places Democrats have been surging in the Trump era, so Democrats expected to win there, but there's a scenario not too hard to conjure where they absolutely must win there.
I can't drink a Celsius on days where we're going to talk about a 269 tie. It just makes me entirely too anxious. Steve Kornacki, thank you for that. Up next, the Biden administration's warning to the Israeli government, saying they could restrict military aid if humanitarian conditions in Gaza do not improve. We'll have the latest from Tel Aviv next. You're watching Meet the Press Now. Welcome back. The Biden administration is once again urging Israel to do more as the humanitarian situation in Gaza continues to deteriorate. In a letter to Israeli officials, Secretary of State Antony Blinken and Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin warned that the U.S. could restrict military assistance to Israel if it doesn't take steps to address humanitarian needs in Gaza within the next 30 days. Today, Israel announced 50 trucks carrying food, water, and medical supplies entered northern Gaza, but aid groups say that's just a fraction of what civilians need. Joining me now is Hala Garani reporting for us in Tel Aviv. So, Hala, let's pick up there. We've seen video of some of this aid entering northern Gaza. How far does 50 trucks really go? And do you get the sense that Israeli officials are taking this threat seriously?
I think it's a wait-and-see situation. There was a 30-day grace period extended by the Biden administration in this letter. In fact, senior Palestinian politicians we spoke to, including one today in Ramallah, said that this 30-day period is essentially, quote, and I'm quoting Mustafa Barghouti, shameful, because that means that people who are now on the verge of famine or who need food and medicine desperately could possibly die during that period. Your question about whether the 50 trucks are enough is no, is the short answer. Before October 7th, 500 trucks went into Gaza, and that's when Gaza was able to produce some of its own food, and there wasn't a near total destruction of the infrastructure in the besieged enclave. Also, sources inside Gaza told NBC News that those 50 trucks didn't really stop in the very north of the Gaza Strip, and they went to Gaza City, so not in the Jabalia refugee camp, where there is really the greatest need, where since October 1st, no food, no medicine, no infant formula has made it into the enclave since then. So, but we are hearing from the U.S.'s ambassador to the UN, Ambassador Thomas Greenfield. She said that it's unacceptable, that if there is indeed a starvation policy, that is not something that the United States would stand behind. And just like many of the most of the pressure and a lot of the pressure that was applied by the United States over the last year on Israel, it's going to be a question of whether or not Israel responds positively. It has not done so in most of the cases. Garrett?
Hala Garani, thank you for that reporting. That's going to do it for us today. We're back tomorrow with more Meet the Press Now. And the news continues with Hallie Jackson right now.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.